Good evening. I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. Larry Kudlow, my colleague and co-host and friend of Kudlow CNBC and Kudlow Radio on the Weekend, is here. We have many economic policies from the prospective President of the United States of America, Hillary Clinton, to discuss. We also have ahead of us the policy that Mrs. Clinton has given on energy policies in the United States. And then generally we can discuss the world economy here in the recovery of 2015, if that's what it is. And do we need to concern ourselves with the very negative headlines in China and the equally frustrating headlines out of Europe, the problems with Greece? Larry, a very good evening to you. I begin with Mrs. Clinton's remarks in these last days about capital gains taxes. Mrs. Clinton looks to be very aggressive in her expectations of raising revenue with capital gains. What are capital gains for, Larry? Don't they just make rich people richer? Good evening to you.
Good evening, John. Well, they provide a lot of opportunity. Look, you can't have a new business without investment. And by the way, you can't have a good job without a new business. So she proposes to raise the tax rate on the single most important investment tax, namely the capital gains tax, which I might add the Tax Foundation regards as the second most important tax for the whole economic growth story. And she's going to double it. Okay? She wants to double it from a statutory rate today of about 20% up to all in 44%. And keep it high for 5 years and not get you back to the 20% rate until 6 years and a day. I mean, this will stifle investment. It will stifle risk-taking. It will stifle innovation. It will stifle economic growth. I mean, I wrote a piece. I said Hillary's inconceivably stupid capital gains tax scheme. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I guess we're going to talk later about her ideas for solar panels and all this green energy stuff. John, somebody ought to tell her that she's going to need private investment if she ever thinks she's going to have these new energy technologies, and she is proposing a tax that will block private investment. And by the way, block economic growth. It's just, to me, beyond belief.
Larry, what is she going to do with all the revenue she gains from these higher capital gains? Is she going to use that revenue for some project she names, or is this just going into the general pool of money I can spend?
Well, here's the irony of this. She's going to lose money. I mean, every time we raise the capital gains tax, revenues go down, or revenues as a share of the economy goes down. I mean, there's a famous moment here when, I don't know if you recall, back in 2008, ABC anchor Charles Gibson, not a supply-sider, is interviewing Obama and asks Obama, well, isn't it true that when Bill Clinton and George W. Bush lowered the capital gains tax, lowered the tax rate, revenues went up? And isn't it also true that in past years, like the 80s, cap gains was raised and revenues went down? And Obama never even responded. He just said, well, maybe, but it's not fair. So the point I'm making is, if you raise this crucial tax on risk investment, John, you're actually going to get less money. And she's going to lose on that. Here's a woman who can't even redistribute efficiently because she doesn't understand anything about the subject.
Redistribution is the watchword, and we welcome Stephen Moore. Steve Moore is the Distinguished Visiting Fellow, Project for Economic Growth at the Heritage Foundation, and most recently, Mr. Moore is engaged in a colloquy with Mr. Krugman of the New York Times on that very subject, Larry, redistribution. Steve, a very good evening to you. First of all, I welcome your comment about Mrs. Clinton's capital gains tax, but let's speak in general about Mrs. Clinton's campaign economic address these last weeks. Mrs. Clinton does not look to be challenging the redistribution practices that Mr. Krugman says Mr. Obama's been successful with. Is that correct, Steve? No challenge to the successes of the Obama economy.
Well, look, I mean, if you look back at Bill Clinton's presidency, you know, one of the things people forget is that Bill Clinton actually reduced the capital gains tax. Remember that, Larry? He and Newt Gingrich cut the capital gains tax rate from 28% down to 20%, and the economy exploded. We had great growth. We got more revenue from the capital gains tax when the rate was 20% than when we did it 28%. So Larry is right that we're gonna lose revenue from Hillary Clinton's proposal. We would have the highest capital gains tax in the world. Now, here's the thing that's strange about this: is Hillary Clinton, when she gave her speech last week on the economy, she made a correct observation. Now, what's happening in this economy right now is businesses are profitable, they're efficient, they are productive, but they're not reinvesting the money that they're making back into the economy to hire more workers, to build new factories and purchase new equipment and machinery and computers. And she was asking the question, why aren't they doing that? And the reason is precisely because of dumb ideas like this. If you raise the tax on capital gains, which is just a tax on investment, the return on investment, this is such a simple concept, John. If you tax something, you get less of it. So why would you want to tax the very returns on the capital that this country so vitally needs? I agree with Larry. I think it is a stupendously stupid idea. I think it would hurt the economy, and she's doing this, John, purely in the name of class warfare, even though it's not going to help the economy and it's not going to raise any money.
So she will have less money to redistribute with the policies that she approves of than Mr. Obama's used. Larry, it sounds like Mrs. Clinton is the perfect weapon. She's going to starve the beast.
Well, I don't think that's what she has in mind. Right. That's an interesting side point. I mean, my point is that Ms. Clinton can't even redistribute efficiently, okay? We used to kid Jack Kemp about this years ago because Jack believed in a pure Laffer curve and would argue, you lower tax rates, marginal tax rates, and most particularly the capital gains tax rate, and you'll get more money. And then in Jack's model, you could spend this money on what he would call worthy causes from the government, helping poverty and so forth and so on. We could debate that another time. But she doesn't understand any of this stuff. And look, all this business about, she's got this riff about short-termism and long-termism and all this stuff. And, what Steve is describing here, we need quite simply to slash the corporate tax rate and to stop double taxing profits made overseas. And while we're at it, we should have full cash expensing for new investment. The point is, these companies are not run by stupid people, and they are beholden to their shareholders. And if they see that their after-tax rate of return on American investments is subpar, then guess what? They won't make that kind of investment, and they will take the money overseas. In this case, if they see another assault on risk-taking and investment in high-risk ventures, then they're not going to do that. And so we're going to ask ourselves, where is the next Apple? Where is the next Google? Where is the next Uber? I mean, these are important. They're all linked together. And she just, Steve, look, here, she's got smart people around her, including Larry Summers. How could they not know this? History tells us this. One
of the things, Larry, that they think is, we should tax capital gains at the same rate we tax ordinary income. Well, that's fine and good, except that they forget something, which is what you just mentioned. We also have a corporate tax. So when you think about it, John, this isn't that complicated. If a corporation makes money, it has to pay 35% corporate tax on that money. And then only after it's paid that tax can it distribute the money back to the shareholders in the form of either a dividend or a capital gain. So it's a double tax on that same income. Larry, I did the numbers. If you put in place her 40% capital gains tax, you're talking about raising the tax on investment to about 65%. Now, who's going to want to risk their money, in the hopes of investing in the next Apple or the next Uber? And by the way, normally, most companies that are started fail. So there's a big fail rate. You're looking for the one big success, and then you hit a success, and the government takes 65% of your money away from you. And let me add one other thing that I don't think she understands. If you raise the capital gains tax, what you do, John, is we call this as economists a lock-in effect, that people won't sell their stock because they don't want to pay the high tax. Well, when you have a lock-in effect, what that does is it helps existing companies, right, because their stock remains high because people don't sell it. But when they can't sell it, they can't invest in the new startup firms, the new Apples, the new Ubers, the new great 21st century companies that we need in this country. I'm just mystified why she doesn't get that. We should be zeroing out the capital gains tax, right, Larry, not doubling it.
And you see, this is such a key point. the idea of locking in investment liquidity. Jude Wanniski, journalist, author, many, many years ago, called this the reoxygenation of the economy. The willingness to take your profits on one investment and then move the cash into a new investment, as Steve is describing. Now, if you're going to be locked in for 6 years at this high rate of, say, roughly 45%, you're not going to do that. So the economy will not have the new oxygen for the bloodstream necessary to keep revitalizing a dynamic economy. It stops the marketplace from working. And I don't care whether you hold the thing a day, a month, a year. People shouldn't care about that. What they should care about is getting a good after-tax return on their investment, particularly their risk investment. I mean, the capital gains tax is really an important tax. And Steve, she's just playing to Bernie Sanders.
Just a minute, gentlemen. We'll address this. Mrs. Clinton said on Friday, Mrs. Clinton, I'm looking for a new creative, innovative, disruptive ideas that will save capitalism for the 21st century. When we come back, Larry Kudlow, CNBC, and Steve Moore, the Heritage Foundation, we will discuss how Mrs. Clinton is looking to save capitalism for the 21st century. Not enough to be president. She's going to save capitalism. I'm John Batchelor.